when it comes to building a plan, I like to start with financial side. So ideally, you're setting some financial goals and things like that for your business within the next 90 days, and not just revenue, but all the way through down to actual net income. Like the real goal of business is to make net income. So building from there, right? So you look at previous results, meaning, let's take a look at last quarter. What was the expenses last quarter? Let's bring those forward into this quarter. What's good? What's likely going to change? Is anything going to change? If they're going to be about the same on the fixed cost, then you put those in, right? And you start to backtrack saying, okay, if this is my expense for the quarter, then what do I need to have in terms of revenue?
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the High Level Podcast called the Spotlight Sessions. Look, it is getting around that time where we need to buckle down and really understand what is it that we need to make a change in our business for it to get past the leaps and bounds that have been holding us back. And for that reason, I've decided that it's best time to bring in somebody who's familiar with this. And I wanted to take a few minutes here to introduce to you a new member in our community, Tanner O'Brien. He's a senior partner at ActionCOACH Central Texas, also a marketer owning a company called Benefic Marketing. And Tanner has specialized in helping business owners use data to improve their marketing and sales funnels, ultimately fine-tuning their business to be self-sustaining assets. Look, we all know that marketing and funnels and customer journeys are all important. But I want you to be excited about breaking down the data associated with each component. And Tanner, I want to welcome you to the show, man. I know this has been a back and forth, and we finally got you here. Schedules connected. How you been?
Fantastic. I'm excited to be here. For those in the audience, I'd love to talk about data and how it all fits together. So yeah, this will be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it here.
Yep. And for those that are tuned in, this is going to be very data driven for you. This is for you. So that way, if you want to take bits and pieces of this and start to really look at what you're doing, we brought the right person in for that conversation. Tanner, before we dive into the specifics, to help our audience get to know you a bit better, I know High Level is a small world, but also a big world at the same time. I know you're an active user, you're in our community, you have friends that use it. What first drew you into using data to help your business and other businesses grow? And when you started to use High Level, how did that kind of amplify it? How did that kind of all come together?
Yeah, no, I mean, probably the simple answer is, rewind about 3 years ago or so. We actually hired a new coach to coach us within our business, and very quickly found out that we didn't know all of the actual data and numbers within our business. Unfortunately, we're at a point where we were almost out of cash, and was kind of forced to go on this journey to learn the data and learn the different things all the way from finance to sales, all the way up to the marketing numbers and what drives it all. Going through that process has allowed us to really make some big differences within the business. So it started very manual. It started on spreadsheets and putting some data together in that form so we could see it, and then being able to integrate platforms like High Level, where we can really track things at a much deeper level, have a lot more things kind of pulled into visuals that we can see it, and the whole team can start to put in the data that helps us make decisions within the business. That really is the big piece that kind of brought it all together for us.
I appreciate you, just kind of giving us the full view on this, because data, I mean, data could overwhelm a lot of people just hearing the word data, and then the mind starts playing these tricks of, well, go this route, that route. It's like back in the day when you didn't have an actual app that gets you the directions of where to go. You're figuring it out, and looking at signs and all that good stuff. You know, with what you do on an everyday basis. With data, with numbers, with strategy, how do you keep yourself fresh? What do you do to keep yourself enjoying what you do every day?
Oh man, the when it comes to the number side of things, I'm probably a little bit biased because I come from kind of the finance industry and really enjoy the number side, whereas some of my business partners don't necessarily enjoy it or hadn't enjoyed it like we did. But being able to get into a habit, I think is a thing that really set it apart. So it doesn't feel overwhelming. So to give you a little bit of context, like I start every working day by looking at numbers first. Where are we financially? Where is our marketing numbers at? Are we on plan? Are we off plan? It doesn't take a whole lot of time because it's done consistently, but it kind of takes that overwhelm out so that I can focus on all the things that actually move the needle rather than just getting drowned out by the numbers that we take a look at.
And I appreciate you mentioning that because, right, when we bring folks on to our podcast, they have an expertise and they have a background associated. And I know as people get to know you, they will, look into your name, your business further. They'll do their due diligence, right? Because they're here for a reason. They're here to learn, but also bolt on tools and expertise on. But you mentioned something that I think is important here just to kind of pivot into the next part of our conversation, which is, in your previous career, prior to being an entrepreneur, you had a VP role at a top three bank.
Mhm.
And that was, I mean, that's, again, this is just to set some context here. Could you, could you mention a little bit about how that transitioned you into then going into entrepreneurship yourself and putting the data at the center versus all the other fun stuff associated with the day-to-day operations?
Yeah, so I mean, I was fortunate in kind of my journey that my parents actually had been in entrepreneurship and things like that for a while, and come kind of towards the end of the banking career that I had the opportunity to kind of join into the coaching firm that we have together. But the reason for that was the information, the knowledge that I kind of had around data analytics, numbers, kind of all the things that come along with kind of that recovering banker side of things, and was able to implement that within the business. So it was a weak point within the business previously, for our coaching business specifically, and being able to kind of plug in allowed us to really grow and look at things in a different way. So it brought the complementary piece or the other pillars within the business that the business didn't currently have, and being able to use a skill set that had kind of already developed a little bit over time. So that's kind of the shorthand story of kind of getting into it. But it really came down to what are the strengths and the skill sets that I have? How do we put that into the business and then put it in a way that everyone that's responsible for making decisions in the business are able to make clearer decisions because we have the information in front of us to be able to make those decisions.
And it sounds like the family business bolted you on, which is nice. And you have that story in your belt now as experience in a tool, so you can understand where someone might be bringing on other people to jump on and they're in that finance expertise. How could we leverage that expertise like you got to leverage in your family business, which is awesome. Now that we got the audience warmed up to understand you, your personality, what you're about, and the value you bring, I just want to, remind the audience here, comment below with your questions. If you have an aha moment, share it. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Facebook Live, our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we want to engage with you. We're going to leave some information below on how to get a hold of Tanner O'Brien, his team, and just overall that next level of experience that you may be looking for. But Tanner and I have crafted together a topic today that is going to that is designed to really give you awareness and some action items on what you should be doing next. So today's topic is called leveraging data to solve the right problem in your marketing and sales funnel. And we put together 3 key pillars that we're going to discuss here for you. First one is key metrics to measure, right? What data points are most crucial for optimizing your sales and your conversions? The second is to divide to multiply. How analyzing and improving each stage of that funnel, pipeline, process can give you overall better results. And then the third one is building that 90-day business plan. All 3 of these are easier said than done. But I just want you to know whether you're already a high-level user, whether you're looking to get into some sort of business and entrepreneurship, the data drives the steps and the results of any business. So without further ado, Tanner, I know you're ready to take this rocket ship off. Let's start unpacking this first pillar here, which is the key metrics to measure. And I would love for you, if you can, to unpack this from the agency SaaS maybe perspective as the person who maybe is using high level for their business to serve others.
Mhm.
And then if you can pivot into how agencies can use this to help their customers be aware and leverage this.
Yeah, so I absolutely love that. If we start looking at kind of what are some of the things that we can be measuring, and maybe where do we start and where do we go, right? As you alluded to earlier, we could drown in the number of data points that we can take a look at, and we can very overwhelming. But the question is like, what is it that we can start tracking today, and how do we evolve that over time? So, regardless of what business you're in, whether you are kind of on the agency side or you're starting to work with some of your clients and helping them kind of understand, it becomes what are the metrics that we need to measure as we look at the different departments within the business. So, if we take marketing as an example, we can start there from you could look as simple as just lead to conversion rate to sale, or you can look at more specific stuff within the sales funnel itself, like what happens when we have a lead and what are the steps that need to go through before it becomes a sale. And then down to, once a sale takes place, is it a recurring sale? Is it a one-time sale? How does that fit into kind of the overall business model? So there's a number of different things to start looking at tracking. But kind of my favorite place to start for most business owners out there in general. So this will go kind of for both sides, right? If you're looking at building out kind of your agency and getting really good at it, to how do I help my clients understand more things down the road, I start with the basics, which is essentially let's start with leads. Let's start with marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads. You can call it sales opportunities or sales conversations, and then ultimately kind of sales or enrollments, depending on kind of the business that you're in, right? So I usually start with those, and how I maybe kind of putting some definitions around it may give a good place to start. So how I've always taken a look at is like lead is essentially I have someone that I can contact, right? I have a name, I have an email, maybe a phone number, maybe it's I can direct message them on Instagram or some other platform, but I have a way to contact them. They haven't necessarily said, hey, I'm interested in anything yet, but I have a way that I can contact them. They're in my list. The next layer then would be marketing qualified. Marketing qualifies a lead. And the way that we've chosen to define it, now I'll preface this by saying if you're going down this path in your own business, you got to define it for you, right? Every business is a little bit different. Everyone's sales cycles are a little bit different. So defining these for you makes a lot of sense. Um, Marketing qualified lead then for us has been really engaged, someone who says, hey, I'm interested in the stuff that you are doing or have. They may not be ready to buy yet, they may not even be qualified to buy yet, but they're in some sort of engagement with you. I like to look at it as, do we have two-way communication? Whether it's a text message exchange, a direct message exchange, an actual phone call, but we've got some sort of two-way communication or engagement there. And then sales qualified is the sales team, whoever's responsible for sales in the business actually qualifies them, says, here's the checkbox that we have that we need to check off that says, yes, this person has the ability to buy from us. And then from there, sales conversation, again, depending on length of sales cycle, some of these may be very condensed. Other times they may be, a 30, 40, 60-day cycle. So that's traditionally where I start. And then as we continue to look at what else can we measure, whether it's specifically on the marketing side of things or we start getting into the sales funnel, then we start to kind of break it down a little bit further from there.
And I appreciate you breaking down this foundation. Typically, everyone's at a different part of their journey, how they manage their business, how they present their sales pipeline, their marketing pipeline, and how big. Maybe they're a small independent marketer, freelancer, evolving, or they are an established business with big budgets and everything is just accounted for a little differently. But I appreciate you unpacking the marketing qualified lead, the sales qualified lead. And those are important parts that are driven by the amount of money you invest and what you could almost expect back and project. I guess when it comes to planning this out, for the marketing qualified lead journey, the sales qualified lead journey, for those that are not using some sort of pipeline management, how do
Mhm.
we start to incorporate that pipeline management? And from your expertise and seeing it with your clients, what changes does that do?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give a simple response to the first part of that question, which is, platforms like High Level are a phenomenal way to kind of start this process. Because I'm a big fan of just start building out the pieces that you can track today. So what is happening, right? So if it's I've got a marketing qualified lead, they need to get to sales qualified lead. What are the things that are happening? And let's actually create pipeline stages for that. So if you're starting with some sort of platform, if you're getting into High Level and you're using it, you have the ability to create each of those pipeline stages. Now that could be, lead comes in, I've got my marketing qualified lead. Maybe the next stage is connected. Maybe the next stage after that is I've connected and we had a 2 minute conversation versus a 3 or minute or longer conversation, right? Which we kind of call a presentation. And then what's the next step from there? We kind of start building. So if we're looking at kind of what are some of the first steps or kind of the first ways to get into it, kind of things that we coach our clients to do, are breaking down what are some of those basic pieces and leveraging a platform like High Level, highly recommended. If we don't have the ability to even start there, then it's something as simple as Excel. Like it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's just a matter of can we start tracking the basics today so that we can build the foundation for getting deeper in how we structure this for the future.
And it's we appreciate, right, your use of high level and how you position it to your clients, and because you really don't understand it until you use it. So that's why it's exciting to have you on here. And I don't know what your expertise is or what your opinion is of AI, but everyone's got a different perspective on how they look at it. How could we use AI to complement the learning journey with the numbers we have, um, versus assuming that it replaces hiring an expert to be by your side, right? Like, because I think the biggest thing, right? Someone say, "I could just use AI. I don't need to have a coach," or everything's on the internet, right? Like, how do we blend AI and someone like yourself with your expertise, your knowledge, and what you're doing for others together to help that metric to measure process?
Yeah, so I'm personally I'm super excited about the applications as AI continues to develop, both from a number standpoint and how can it help us continue to create efficiencies within, say, the marketing and sales pipeline. Um, that all being said, I think that there's something about the learning journey that we have to go through as individuals to understand the concept of why are we measuring the things that we're measuring. How does that relate to to this point or this point? So I take you back to what I said at the very beginning. Rewind 3 years ago, we had a coach that we hired, and this individual has built massive, very successful companies. Very fortunate to kind of learn some things from him. And he took us through this journey of creating spreadsheets, right? We needed to create these processes of what we were going to track and what we were going to measure in the business. He never gave us a single spreadsheet. He allowed us to look at some stuff, but he never gave us a template to do it because it was the process of learning what I needed to track, how it needed to be measured, and why am I measuring those specific things? How does this one metric up here actually, flow downstream, and what does that actually impact? So there's something about going through that process that I think AI can supplement the speed of that learning, but there's still the process that we still have to do the learning work in order to grow as individuals and know how to use these tools at an even higher capacity down the road.
In that journey that you had, hiring a professional that was levels ahead of where you wanted to be, and then experiencing that, coupling it with technology, coupling it with data, with your expertise, how has that impacted, staying relevant with all these different changes with technology and customer demands and potential client asks? Like, the learning journey is so key. Could you unpack that transition that now when you look back, wow, that was worth the process?
Yeah, so I'll actually give you kind of an example of what this learning journey has felt like, and kind of what that feels like today, being able to look back in hindsight. So I was actually having a conversation with somebody today, kind of in their journey with building their business, and they're at a tough spot. they kind of articulate some different things, and they've worked with other professionals in the past and just didn't really get results. And now they're really in kind of a tough spot. Because we had gone through something similar, because we were in that exact same spot and were forced to go through the learning process of how to overcome that. It wasn't just a here's the solution, implement it, you're done. Like, we had to go through that process. The empathy, the understanding, and the knowledge of how to help guide this individual out of the position they're in today and into that next level of success is greater than any time I can ever see in the past. Whether that's for me, for my business partners who've been doing it much longer than I have, that learning journey, I think really that moment was where you can kind of take a look back and go, that's why we went through this learning journey. That's why we had to kind of step on some of the stones and take the tumbles down the hill, because we understood then how to catch ourselves, how to move this forward, and be able to continue to pass that knowledge on at a much greater rate. So I'm a big fan of the continued learning journey. Ideally, it doesn't always have to be the pain you individually have to go through, but if you can learn some of these lessons from mentors, from courses, from books, from all of those types of things, um, yeah, work harder on yourself than you do on your job, I think is something from Jim Rohn. I've really taken that to heart, and it's really paid dividends in our ability to continue to level up and be able to pass that knowledge on for clients and others within our community.
I appreciate you just kind of, walking alongside here of just building this foundation, right? Because, when I listen to a podcast or I'm looking at something on YouTube, like I do want the answers right away. But without understanding some of the backstory, but also some of the examples and some of the emotional attachment to what's being shared, it doesn't really bring any value until I know it's meaningful. And I appreciate you sharing the meaningfulness around what you've been through, what you've helped your clients do, how you use high level, and these key metrics. For somebody that has listened this far or just jumped in, and they're ready to make a change when it comes to tracking and measuring their business from an agency perspective, could you share the equivalent of some spreadsheets, but give them enough that they could start doing on their own before we jump into the next pillar here?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of go back to what are the core things to track, and we really don't have to make this complex. I think it's the what are the couple metrics that you can start to track today that you may already be tracking, you're just not putting them in a position where you can see them, because there's a big difference between tracking the data and having it in a position that we can do anything with. So a quick aside on that is, for 2 years, 3 years ago, so go 2 years back from that. Um, we were tracking a lot of data, had tons and tons of data with every, lead channel that we were using and all sorts of stuff, but it was never aggregated in a place that we could actually do anything or make decisions off of. So a simple thing that we need to do is literally take the information, put it into one page that we can actually see what are the things that are happening and make some decisions off of it. So why I say that is there might be things that, the listeners today are tracking in their business. I may have, my click-through rate. I may have the landing page traffic. I may have number of leads. I may have number of conversations, right? I may have all of this data, but is it in a position that we can start to look at it, channel by channel or campaign by campaign? What is actually performing at a better level so that we can allocate our resources, our time and our money in an area that's going to have the biggest impact. So if you're just jumping in, or if you're kind of saying, how do I take this to the next level, or what's the next thing I can do, the big things to look at are, what are the things that I can start tracking today? Leads, marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads. Let's get deeper into maybe connection rate or bad data rate, right? We know that there's some leads that come in that just are wrong numbers and they're not correct, and there's some things that we need to correct, but you track just how many of those or what percentage of your total leads come in that way. So we can make some decisions off that. But just start with the stuff that you can see today, and then maybe next month look for one more that you haven't been tracking that you want to start tracking, and build it over time. It's not a we get this done tomorrow thing. It's a let's build this over time, so we go back to being overwhelmed. You don't feel as overwhelmed in building this process.
Yeah. And that's the perfect segue into, right. honing in on dividing your time, dividing your attention, dividing your future thinking on things that you could actually do something with that are relevant, right, to the fun stuff that you enjoy, but also the important stuff that maybe you didn't realize could be the bottleneck of why you're in the position you're in, or the plateau you're in. So we're going to hit this second pillar strong here, this divide to multiply. How do we go about analyzing and improving our beautifully built, well invested, premium, certified, expert created, shipped and delivered funnel that has all the bells and whistles and everything there, that all we had to do was say, hey, give me what's going to do the job? How do
Hmm.
we now take those components of the funnel and the customer journey, quantify it into what you shared before, which are these stages or these components that show, all right, we got something, pull that lever, let that door open mindset, into, at the end of the day, let's call it what it is. We want a new relationship. We want revenue. We want to grow our business while helping others grow theirs.
Hmm. Man, I love this topic of divide to multiply. It was something that was taught to me, when we first jumped into, the Action Coach franchise and that sort of thing. And it's the process of breaking down, a funnel, right? It's we teach it from a customers is leads times conversion rate. Can't just go get more customers, but we can go get more leads and we can improve our conversion rate. Well, we know as, marketers that there's so much more than just leads and conversion rate. There's so many additional things that we can track within there. And when we break this down, this is really the key component to growing and scaling a business, is understanding how this piece really fits together. So just from a marketing standpoint, right? If we're looking at this funnel that we have built out that has all the bells and whistles, we can track everything in there. Being able to look at that and say, where are the bottlenecks? Where is the lowest conversion rate that if I move it by 1%, it has the biggest downstream effects? Probably the biggest piece that gets often overlooked is it's not necessarily just looking at the numbers, but it's looking at the numbers against what you had planned. So I know we'll talk a little bit about kind of how do we build a plan, but when you look at the numbers against a plan or against a standard, right? If I know that my conversion rate from, let's say, landing page traffic to form fill, if I know that the standard of that is supposed to be, call it 5%, can be whatever it needs to be, but let's call it 5%, and I'm trending at 4%. Well, there's something there I can take a look at because I'm off plan. But if I don't have that, unless I'm looking at industry standards or something else like that, I don't know that that number is necessarily off, right? So these are kind of the ways that we start taking a look at where are the biggest bottlenecks and which problems do we need to solve today? Because there's 100 things that we could do as an agency owner, as a marketer, as a business owner. You could solve 100 different problems. The reality is we just don't have the time to do it. So what's going to be the biggest lever that we can pull? What's the biggest conversion rate between steps that we have the ability to tackle? I'll give a really simple example of this. The team and I had we had been working through this process on a more on the sales side, kind of lead gen to sales side, and you know we had this feeling that we had issues of people showing up to this initial discovery call. Like we were getting them booked, but we just had a feeling that they weren't showing up. So what did we do? We went to solve the problem, and we spent 2 weeks of our time and our money, team's time, all of that kind of stuff to solve this problem. What emails need to go out? What needs to be the content of it? What copy do we need to change? What reminder calls do we need? Like all these different components. And then when we actually pulled the data, because we weren't looking at it the way that we should have at that point, pulled all the data out and realized that we had an 80% show rate to that call. It's like, that's not the problem. The problem was actually a step down the funnel that was a much lower conversion rate, should have been closer to 80%. It was actually like 40%. It's like, okay, well, that's where we need to go spend our time. And that's why we break it out, right? If we're going to look at how do we amplify or delegate the time that we do have available, where do we put it that's going to have the biggest impact on the downstream results? Now, if I know that results are holding, if we take, let's say, everything in the funnel, every conversion rate is consistent month over month over month, and I've got a connect rate that's 3%, and I know that standard 6%. If all I need to do is focus on that one little piece to increase from 3% to 6% and everything else holds, I just doubled my business. And that is one of the biggest levers that you can pull.
But how do you know? How do you know how to get there? Like I know, like, trying to put myself in the shoes here right now of somebody who's watching this, listening to it, and they're like, well, like you figured it out, but like the questions to ask. Like, what are the right questions to ask? What is the right, like, how do you know what the where the North Star is? Is it just
Mhm.
based on what the bank account says? Is it based on survey results? Like, what's a good North Star that you could at least give us an idea of where to look first?
Yeah, so honestly, this goes back to the previous part of the conversation, which is going through that learning progression, right? The reason why we go through it and why we can't just always say here's the end result, go after it, or implement it. It's the understanding how things connect together. So if I'm going to start measuring these three data points, the next question is, why am I getting the results that I am? Could be positive, could be neutral, could be negative, but asking the question of why allows us to better understand what's causing the result. Because if it's a positive result, we want to ask the question of how do we duplicate that? How do we do more of it? If it's a negative result, how do we improve it? But when we go through this process, so like getting back to like what's the North Star that I can kind of take that next step on? I'm just starting this process. I don't know what questions to ask yet. The first question is, what am I measuring? The second question is, why am I getting the results that I am in the things that I'm measuring? And that's going to lead you to that next question or that next layer that you can pull back. And we just continue to iterate that process. And then we start to make some decisions around those, right? If we say, this is a result that I want to see, what happens if I do a little bit more of that? Do the results hold? If the results hold, then I now have a connection on how that works. If results don't hold, then I have different questions I want to ask. But it's this iterative process of going through and critically thinking, how do these pieces fit together? That's going to allow you to become a better business owner, a better marketer, a better salesperson. All of these things is that iterative process of going through the learning work.
I want to talk about two potential avatars here. Um, the doom and gloom, the negative person, always thinking the worst case scenario person that's like, man, these numbers are could be better, they could be better, right? And then also the person that is the manifest that's always positive. Um, the bank account maybe isn't the driving factor on how they determine the business. It's the forward thinking that determines the business. The power of data to fuel both or to slow down one or the other in their train of thought thinking. Could you unpack that a little bit based on your expertise and what you've experienced?
Yeah, I love it because I've seen both ends of the spectrum quite a bit, which gets into the when somebody's building a forecast and budgeting and things like that, you can have people on both sides of the spectrum. And the fun thing about the data is historical data doesn't lie. When you have accurate data, the data just is the data. The numbers are the numbers. And the more we can understand and kind of reconcile that fact, the easier it is to then start looking at what is realistic. I can still plan to be optimistic and I'm going to move the needle in this very positive, happy direction. And I can kind of try to guard against the worst, right? But if I'm building how we look at things based on actual historical numbers, then I can make decisions based off that, right? That tends to be probably the biggest area that I see the issues with that with some of our clients and folks that I've worked with in the past. It's I build a plan, but I build a plan off of hopes and dreams, and that hopes and dreams could be wildly optimistic, but they could also be hopes and dreams that are also fairly negative and things like that. The Where we can kind of rein some of that in is, well, what happened last quarter? What happened last year? If we're measuring all of the data, we're measuring all of the numbers, then we can extrapolate that and put that as the baseline for this next quarter or this next year or whatever time period you're looking at. And then we can choose which pieces can we influence for this quarter and begin to build a plan that's realistic so that we consistently start to hit things, hit numbers beyond plan. That builds the momentum and allows for wildly optimistic plans and things like that as you continue to move forward.
We have a wide range of listeners that could range from, right, mathematicians, they love math, they love equations, they love that portion, and those that math isn't their strength, but they know how to use the calculator, they know the formula, or they know where to look for the formula. Um, what is what advice, what guidance could you give somebody that's not strong is the strong suit of them is not math, right? So instead of dividing to multiply, they multiply then divide, which can have a totally different, outcome here
Yeah.
as needed, right? You mentioned historical data. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so find out what the historical data is. Don't make up your own data because you're ambitious or you want to create a record to break another record. Make this around substantial, right, as verified as possible information, the industry average, maybe as an example, or maybe you're part of a mastermind or a group and you're getting a collective feel of where people are at based on their lead source for sure. But for someone that's not in that math world and they're like, I'm just going to use the formulas and hope it works with ChatGPT to mix, where can we start with getting better at that?
It's such a great question. The the longer, maybe more mature business answer is, hire folks that are really good at it. It's a compliment. As I came into our business having a little bit more of that mindset, right? Um, that being said, I think being able to take a step back and just say what is it that I actually need to know, and the reality is it's not complex. We really are talking some pretty simple math, but being able to just take a step back and say, what do I need to learn in order to have the business that I always desire, um, and then building some of that discipline. Again, this goes back to, it's not a we're going to do this all tomorrow and yeah, we're going to figure it all out. It's a one step at a time iteration, and that's why I look at, there's a difference between influencing the numbers and the data and just measuring it. So if somebody's just starting on their journey, if you're that person, it's like, I'm not a math person. I don't enjoy this. I don't enjoy tracking. Like I'd much rather be out there and be, the face and hang out with people and all of that kind of stuff. Um, just starting with the measurement first. Don't influence it. Don't try to change it. Just get what is your numbers, because industry standard can be fantastic, but you may not be there yet. And if you're just new and you're just starting out the funnel, or you're just doing networking, you're doing whatever it is, being able to just put the numbers on the paper saying, hey, I talked to 10 people this week and this was my result. Maybe industry standards higher than that, but I know that this is my result. And my result means that next week I'm going to try and do better than I did that last week. And that process over and over again, repeated, will get you to a point that you're starting to see the success that you desire.
Yeah. And that starts to make more sense. And I see it in the comments below, starting to resonate a bit. Because again, we have a variety of users at different stages. And you know, I really appreciate when you say, delegate that, right? Like put put the investment into the right people to do that part of the job while you're doing what you're great at. And I think that's our overall goal at whatever stage we're at, if you're watching this or listening to it, is we want to get to a point where we have our roadmap. And the roadmap has these different milestones on it that says, hey, look, now that we're here, let's do this. And I believe, what you've shared so far is the stuff that people ignore or assume will take care of itself. Like, there's a sales saying that, maybe just great sales managers that I've had or sales leaders I've had and said, hey man, just go sell something and sell a bunch of it and the numbers will take care of itself. So I would do that. I would go sell something and then the numbers would take care of itself because they had a whole team that took care of the numbers. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always apply when you're your own business owner. You're an entrepreneur. The credit's under your name,
Yeah.
the responsibility, the chargebacks, all these components that come into play. And we didn't even get to touch those business operations. We're not trying to scare people away here, but right, bringing clarity to how the numbers and the data matches. Could you touch on how churn can really throw everything off, no matter if you're selling and doing a great job with selling? That churn percentage, could you talk about that a little bit here before we get into more forward thinking, building for the future?
Yeah, it's one of those numbers that it's inevitable. Everyone's going to have some level of churn or attrition within their business. It's okay. It happens. The question is, are we planning for it, and what can we do about it, right? So when I talk to a lot of business owners, one of the biggest things that's often missing from whether it's a financial plan or it's marketing and sales and all of that kind of stuff, it's usually that churn or attrition number. And being able to put that in and say, hey, I'm going to have X number of dollars on average based on my historical results. I'm going to probably see this many, users or clients or customers or whatever fall off at this point. What does that mean that my plan needs to become? How do I make sure that that's supporting the fact that this is natural within our business? And then you can, get into the actual problem or challenge or roadblock in the business that's causing that, right? We still want to address that piece. Um, we tackle it from both sides. We tackle it from the what are the things that I can actually influence and do to help reduce that churn number within the business, from product to service to how frequently are we even touching base with our customers, right? There's so many different things we can take a look at there. But then realistically, it's if we have a really high churn number and we can't get that down and there's nothing being done about it, then what can we influence on the other side? Well, marketing and sales may need to amplify. Like what level do we need to come in that's going to allow us to overcome that piece? And it really just becomes a planning question at that point.
And as I'm listening to you and putting my student hat here on, if I'm if I have data as my metric that I'm looking at, and I'm becoming obsessive over it for the right key points. Maybe I say, what is the cancellation reason? Is the data metric that I measure for my churn.
Yeah.
What is the cancellation reason? And then maybe if I have a multiple salespeople or multiple contractors, who are those attached to that cancellation? Could it be the presentation? Could it be the expectations? Or could it just be not a good fit,
Yeah.
right? Or a product market fit? So thank you for just really taking this on this journey, because this journey, right, has a great ending to it as long as we have a plan. Now, there's so many different plans when you think about entrepreneurship and business. And, for those that are much more experienced, thank you for your patience on kind of following along here, even though you may know this. But for those that are brand new, this is for you because, right, you have, your business plan, which could be general, your operating agreement plan, and a few other plans out there. But I want to hone in on, if you're okay with this, Tanner, this 90-day business plan with data as the key source, the key driver. And how does that 90-day data plan support and complement all the other plans that will jump into that business ecosystem?
Oh man, you ready for this one? This is a fun topic.
So let's ask the audience. For those that are tuning in now, are you ready? I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about before we get into, right, what Tanner's about to unpack here? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're not yet a high level user, you're missing out on meeting people like Tanner, right? I mean, the gentleman here has just unpacked so much. If you're just tuning in, you got to rewind it. Um, Based on these comments, I think we're good to go, man. I mean, you've given us basically the disclaimer that you're about to throw extra value. Go for it.
All right. So when it comes to building 90-day plan, right? The first thing I'll say is most plans are a little too general. And I've been guilty of it in the past. We've coached been guilty of coaching our clients to a little bit too general in the past, right? So when it comes down to understanding and why we track all of this data so specifically is so that we can actually reverse engineer something that's going to allow us to, one, manage our business and manage the activity, and two, actually hit plan and know what to do differently if we're off plan. So when it comes to building a plan, I like to start with financial side. So ideally, you're setting some financial goals and things like that for your business within the next 90 days, and not just revenue, but all the way through down to actual net income. Like the real goal of business is to make net income. So building from there, right? So you look at previous results, meaning, let's take a look at last quarter. What was the expenses last quarter? Let's bring those forward into this quarter. what's likely going to change? Is anything going to change? If they're going to be about the same on the fixed cost, then you put those in, right? And you start to backtrack saying, okay, if this is my expense for the quarter, then what do I need to have in terms of revenue? And this is where it gets a little fun, right? So for those of you that are, users of high level and your agencies, things like that, you have recurring revenue or book revenue, right? So we need to add that in first. What do we expect for that revenue to come in? And what is our churn rate? What is the attrition number? Let's actually plug that in there as well. That as I mentioned before tends to be a miss that I've seen in a lot of at least our clients, is forgetting to kind of put that piece in. So now we've got kind of some basic revenue stuff without any new sales. We've got the expense numbers, and we've got a bottom number for net income. Now ideally we're plugging in some numbers there saying I want X number of dollars in profit. It's not just revenue. I want $100,000 in profit in this next quarter. Okay, backtrack from the expenses, you backtrack from the revenue that you are planning to come in along with the attrition. Now we've got a gap, right? There's the number of sales that we need to go after. Now we're going to actually build a plan of how do we achieve that. And this is where the marketing and the sales numbers are insanely critical in order to be able to hit a plan. Now, I'm going to say something that we haven't really talked about yet is getting deeper than just the let's backtrack it all the way through, but backtracking it by channel, right? If you know that Facebook ads is a great driver for you and it's driven most of the business, then we want to backtrack into that channel. If we know that networking is one, or maybe strategic partners, or things of that nature, whatever your main channels are that have proven to produce business in the past, we want to build a plan based on the results that you've been able to track. This is why we measure. So we reverse engineer all the way up. So we say, all right, I need, I don't know, let's call it $50,000 worth of new sales in the next quarter. Okay, great. So how many clients is that? How many sales meetings is that based on my past conversion rate? When I start to break that out by channel, how many sales is that from Facebook ads? How many sales is that from networking? And then because I now have that number, what's the step just prior to that? Is it a discovery call? Is it lead or a conversation, right? Your stage, your funnel is going to be different, but the point is we get all the way back to the point of marketing activity. So I'll use the offline example of networking as just kind of the key here. So if I know that I need 10 sales from networking, and I know that 10 sales means I need 20 sales conversations, and 20 sales conversations come from talking to 40 people at a networking event. Well, now I've got something that I can go do in the next quarter. I can break that down into weekly. How many people do I need to go talk to? And if I'm not hitting plan, the first question becomes, did I do the activity required? If the answer is yes, then there's probably something else that we need to work on within kind of that funnel. If the answer is no, then there's the first place that we start, is we have to do the activity required. But this is the point of building a 90-day plan that you can actually do something with. And if you're a larger business, like, this is how you can have team members and managers actually look at each individual department, each individual channel, and be able to manage to a level that is tangible. I can't go tell our team members to say, hey, go get more clients, but I can tell them, in order to get more clients, you do this activity and this activity. Did you do them or did you not? And that level is what we need to get to when it comes to building out a plan. Yes, it takes work to do it, but the end results are so much more fruitful because we can actually manage achieving that plan versus the hopes and dreams that we talked about earlier.
I was able to process that, right, without it being filled with technical jargon, sales jargon, complicated frameworks. It sounds like you do this a lot. A bunch of
Just
different
a little
types of
bit, yeah.
with a bunch of different people. Right. And I think that says a lot about, right, finding the right person to work with. I mean, someone that, you know, you can understand and receive that guidance from. And you shared a story, and I know you're very proud, and it's very personal to you, that this mentor, this coach that you and your family hired to come in to help your business, right, to unlock that next stage. What got you here won't get you there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Type of mentality. um, it resonates with you, and I could see in how you present and you share your examples and your stories. Very very deliberate, very detailed, very specific, very laser focused. This episode perhaps is inspiring people to really buckle on to maybe looking into a mastermind or a networking group of like-minded people that they could find someone like yourself, or maybe they're like, hey man, I just want to see how much it would be to work with 10, all right, or like, how do I figure out somebody like that to bring on my team or to partner with? um, could we just unpack something that we really didn't plan to do so here, but I think it aligns with right the business plan and who you partner with to get it. Because if it was easy just to do ChatGPT, or if it was easy just to Google it, I mean, we'd have a bunch more different levels of success rate versus right businesses that are closed for business. Could you share what you would recommend to somebody that would say, look, I like you, I know you, but I don't want to hire you as my coach? Could you help me find a coach that has your style or maybe the elements that I need to get actually coaching from?
Yeah. When you're looking at this, the ideally a conversation like this one today opens enough of y'all's eyes, or kind of how to think about things, so that regardless of who you choose as your mentor, as your coach, as your accountability partner, whatever that ends up looking like, um, just by simply listening to conversations like this one, not just this one, but like this one, right? It's opening up your mind to ask different questions of that person. And that's probably the biggest piece, is find somebody who is receptive to listening to the things that you have going on and that you're learning. Find somebody who is willing to continue their learning journey. Ideally, I mean, if you're looking for someone and they've stopped learning, you're going to quickly outgrow them if you are really on the trajectory of growth and success. So find somebody who's always continuing to learn and grow. And probably most importantly, and this goes for almost every single business owner that I've ever talked to, find somebody who's going to hold you accountable. That tends to be the big thing, right? There's so much information, so many different areas that we can learn. We're sitting here today, we're talking about how to do this stuff. Could you take it? Could you implement some of it today? Absolutely. But I will tell you, as someone who has had uh, you know, was a collegiate athlete, a whole bunch of stuff. Like, I like to really hold myself as a very disciplined person. Like, I hold myself accountable to a lot of things. I still do not hold myself as accountable as the external person that we've hired. That extra little piece, especially being in a business ownership type role where you don't have a manager sitting there saying, did you achieve the activity that you said? Because guess what? I don't have a team yet. And, that networking activity that I said on my plan is going to happen, like, I could choose not to do it. Who's holding me accountable to that level, right? That is the purpose of having somebody that you can trust. Now, for some of you, that's going to be a coach. For others of you, that's going to be a mentor. For others, it's going to be, who's that unreasonable friend that I've known forever that is not afraid to tell me to my face what they actually think because they know it's going to help me in the long run. Find that person that's going to hold you accountable and continue to learn and grow. There's tons of great entities out there that offer these types of services. I'm biased towards Action Coach and our Action Coach here in the area, but find somebody that you can have a conversation with, interview them. Don't just say, hey, I'm going to go hire somebody, find somebody and hire them. Like, actually interview them, go through the process, allow them to kind of walk you through what that's going to look like to help you get the return on investment that's required if you're going to invest in something within your business.
Thank you for that for that guidance and advice. Because if you're listening to this and you're somewhat similar to how I do, I've came from a sales role in the past in the last couple of years. So I'm very empathetic with salespeople's time, and I'm quick to buy. Sure, let's do it, right? And I assume and I hope that they have the best interest in me. And I'm probably your best customer, right? In different things that I need help with, or I'm looking for caught my emotional or my attention for to solve a problem. But what I really enjoyed what you shared was just go through the process. Go be the complete student, whether you know something or not. Don't treat it like a podcast episode. where you're trying to complement it and navigate it. Let them truly prove to you, if they want to earn your business, that they are the right choice. To your point, asking the right questions, listening to you, and how much do they talk rather than listen is another takeaway I got from you. Um, when it comes to coaches, right? Not all coaches are created equal. Not all softwares are created equal. Not all people are created equal. Could you share a little bit about the path you took on why you chose to bolt on to the Action Coach methodology, planning, support versus just doing it on your own?
Yeah. We've always looked for ways that we can continue to amplify what we do and know that we continue to move in the right direction. So whether it's hiring a coach, finding the right platforms to work through, um, walking through the iteration of how does this help us become better? That has always been the question, and being able to see that in action over the first couple months of the experience with it. Um, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't because of the mentors that we've had access to. It's I wouldn't be here because without the coach that we have access to. Um, that's helped us continue to grow more than anything else that we've ever tried in the past.
And there's so much to unpack with that. And I think the connection that we've just brought together was, you know, whether you're an agency, a marketer, your customers feel the same way about you listening in. Your customers are bolting on to you. They're maybe sharing a similar story about you, even though you're not there in the conversation. So let's not take for granted the influence, the impact, the mentorship, whether it's organized or whether it's just organic for what you're doing every day. And you owe it to yourself to always get better. And Mr. Tanner O'Brien here has shared in his years of wisdom and experience and access to, certain, mentors and being a mentee, that you always got to stay learning. So I want to say thank you so much to all of you for joining me on this journey, on this interview with Tanner. Tanner, I want to thank you for really just giving us an incredible insight, having an incredible conversation, not making it to a point where we cringe or we like wonder, what do I do with this? Like, you really, really, really brought us to a point where it's like now we got to take action on our own and determine our next three steps. We have everything we need right now. We have the platform, we have the community, we have the knowledge base, we have the business element that you've shared with us. Now it's up to us as listeners to take the next step. Before we wrap this up, Tanner, could you share with our audience, with me, some closing comments just to really take this bundle of wealth of knowledge here and move forward?
Closing comments. Take it step by step. I think if there's anything that comes out of this is really and truly business is a journey, and being able to just take it one step at a time, because it's going to be hard some days, as many of you already know. The numbers and the data tracking and everything that comes along with what we talked about here today can get very overwhelming. The question is, what's the first step? What's just one step that you can take tomorrow? Start getting some consistency with it. Now let's look at adding one more the next month or the next week, and just start to build over time. It took me 2 years of consistently going through this process to understand it at the depth of the level that I do today. That was a slow process. There were days where I'm like, why am I doing all of this? But by simply putting one foot in front of the other, this stuff will start to come into a form that you can start to use. So don't get overwhelmed by it. Take it one step at a time. Leverage what you already have and put it in a way that you can make some decisions around, and find surround yourself with the right people that's going to help you continue to move forward.
And I'm going to say, I feel like I have the best job in the world talking to people like yourself, having a community that's engaged and excited about the topics we bring to the table. Tanner, man, thank you, man. It was a pleasure to hang out with you. A pleasure to have you join our audience. To our audience, you already know if you can share this with somebody that can really appreciate it, maybe it's what they need to get them over the slump they're on. If you're new to our community, you're going to meet folks like Tanner and others that we've brought on to this stage here. Get to know them in our community, find them online, start by sparking a conversation. Till the next episode, we got more coming at you. Tanner, man, thank you. To our audience, thank you. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.